Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Project Sanity. I'm Brandon Sutton, and I'll be your host for tonight. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Richard Green. Say hello, Richard.
Uh, Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
You messed up the joke. You're supposed to say hello, Richard.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
I'm bad
Like,
at
say
this.
goodnight, Gracie. Anyway, whatever. And my other co-host, the lovely Adair Schmidt, all the way out in Washington. Say hello, Adair.
Hello, Brandon. Don't call me lovely, though. Hey, folks, I'm glad you're
Okay.
joining us tonight. It's wonderful to have you. And for those of you who complain on Twitter when I don't wear it, here's the bow tie.
Yes, Adair is a people pleaser. He wears his bow tie when you ask. So please harass him on Twitter to always wear the bow tie. I just want to thank the Benjamin Dixon Show channel for hosting us. So if you're watching us there, please like, subscribe, and share. If you're watching us on the Project Sanity channel, please do the same. And we have a packed show for you tonight. And by packed, I mean we have two topics, and we both talk, and I talk a lot. So you know what?
Well, we're going to get to one of them. We'll get to one of the topics.
To one and a half of them. And so let's start strong. Well, let's start strong, or rather, let's talk about something we shouldn't have to talk about, which seems to be just the direction this show always goes in. Hey, let's talk about this thing that we shouldn't have to relitigate because it's been decided a long time ago, but it seems as though people still want to talk about it. But hey, Nazis, whatever, or I'm sorry, the alt-right or whatever. Like,
Nazis.
Here's the thing. Like, I'm not too keen on calling them Nazis or the alt-right or fascists. I mean, I think in a lot of ways these words obscure or are either obscure or downplay or make hyperbolic. The truth is that they are incredibly problematic people who sometimes advocate genocide or advocate for some certain groups of people having less rights. So call them what you want, but like, I don't care. So for many of you might have heard that Jeremy Scahill, one of the editors / writers for The Intercept, as well as the writer of the bestseller Dirty Jobs, no, not Dirty Jobs, Dirty Wars. I always say Dirty Jobs. I'm sorry. Was recently pulled out of an episode of Real Time with Bill Maher over the inclusion of Milo Yiannopoulos as the headlining guest. And so I'm just going to read his statement that he wrote his open letter. And he posted on Twitter to explain his reasoning, and so I'll just read it out loud. Today, I saw the news that Milo Yiannopoulos is scheduled to be the lead guest on Friday's episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. I was already scheduled to be a panelist on the program that same evening, along with Larry Wilmore and Jack Kingston. I have decided that I will not be appearing on the show. Before I explain my reasons for this, I want to say that I have had the pleasure of working as a correspondent for Real Time, and over the years have been a guest or panelist many times. I have total admiration and respect for the producers, writers, and others who work on the show. Over the past decade, the people at Real Time have become like family to me. I passionately disagree with and find offensive some of Bill's views, particularly when his comments on Islam and Muslims veer into vitriol. At the same time, I have deep respect for Bill and his voice on many other issues, and I believe he and his staff have created a vital platform for debate and discussion that at times I love and other times loathe. I know I fall into the latter category for some of the show's viewers because I hear from them every time I appear. Whatever one might say about Bill, he always allows guests to challenge him or disagree with him. But Milo Yiannopoulos is many bridges too far. He has ample venues to spew his hateful diatribes. There is no value in debating him. Appearing on Real Time will provide Yiannopoulos with a large, important platform to openly advocate his racist anti-immigrant campaign. It will be exploited by Yiannopoulos in an attempt to legitimize his hateful agenda. Yiannopoulos' appearance could also be used to incite violence against immigrants, transgender people, and others at a time when the Trump administration is already seeking to formalize a war against some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Yiannopoulos has shown he will use his appearances to publicly attack and shame specific ordinary people by name, a practice which could lead to violence or even death. Real Time, of course, has the right to book whomever it wants on its show, including Yiannopoulos, but I cannot participate in an event that will give a platform to such a person. For these reasons, I have informed the producers of Real Time that I will not appear on the show. Jeremy Scahill, journalist. So that was his open letter to the public, and I suppose to Real Time with Bill Maher, that he will not be appearing along with Milo Yiannopoulos. So let's get initial thoughts on this. Adair, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think it's great. you know, to an extent, personally, the only debate I feel that anybody should be having with a Nazi is an internal debate on whether you're going to beat them within an inch of their life or a quarter inch. Like that's how far that debate needs to go. Like there is no debating, there is no talking, there is no legitimizing the idea that genocide is something that's acceptable. There is, you're a Nazi and you can, you know, catch these fantastic hands. Like I'll even show you where to find them. That's a Harry
Fantastic
Potter joke
hands.
for the rest of you.
My God. Oh, I get it. Fantastic Beasts of That was awful. You should feel bad.
That was
for that.
great. That was great. You're a hater. But
you should feel worse
seriously.
about that. You should feel worse about that joke than you should feel about advocating violence.
I really have zero problems with beating down. That is my patriotic duty, is to beat down Nazis. I think Jeremy Scahill's open letter is fine. I think Bill Maher, Maher, however the hell you say his name, I think
Maher.
He's just as problematic as a lot of the people that we condemn in that Nazi / alt-right movement. He has seriously racist views when he talks about, in particular, Islamophobia. When he like a lot of other people uses Islam as a straw man for brown people from the Middle East. Period. Like you can try to gussy it up and say, well, it's about the religion. No, you're not. You are literally saying something that is racist, and you are demonizing an entire ethnic group of people to further your own new atheist ideology. And as an atheist, I'm frankly disgusted by him. I think he's absolutely 100% an issue, and he uses the same kind of rhetoric, the same kind of bullying, and that he's trying to legitimize by having Milo on.
Yeah, so I think Milo. No, I was just going to say quickly that Milo and Bill are very similar in their approach, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, and you can expand on it. But I think that's an important aspect. I think that what Milo does, I'm a bit of a masochist or whatever, so I went and watched a bunch of Milo, and what Milo does is he says bombastic things, inflammatory things, usually with some sort of grain of truth buried deep within them, and he usually does it in a hyperbolic way, and it fits into this whole narrative that Trump also plays into of, you know, he brings attention to conversations that we wouldn't be having otherwise if he didn't say it in this hyperbolic, ridiculous way. It's problematic for a lot of the same reasons. And I'll let you go ahead and then Brandon.
No, I agree with what some of Adair said, but I exactly the same. What I would say is that Maher is part of this, not so thinly veiled racist elite liberal class that we've seen a lot of recently. We've seen a lot of this. Well, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat, I put the D behind my name, and with this veil of righteousness, I have, you know, put around myself rather, I am allowed to, rather, once this veil is over them, they feel justified in going out and attacking others because they're on the theoretically right side of our political spectrum. You know, we have the Democrats and the Republicans, and they demonize the Republicans for being backwards and etc. And they have a much higher opinion of themselves because they have decided to be part of the smart party, the not racist party, all of those things that we think, of on the left as being intrinsic to the Democrats, or rather what they think is intrinsic of themselves. But we know better, right? We know Democrats are not as different from Republicans as they would like to be, especially at the highest level. And once they can't be racist by nature of being Democrats, they immediately go out and look for people to attack. Just so happens they, pick brown people and women. Like, it just so happens. I just had to look at what's been happening to Susan Sarandon recently. It's become very clear that liberals at the elite level are incredibly, incredibly racist and incredibly sexist, or rather misogynist, to be more clear, and it slips out very, very often. Scahill said, I think that he's gotten a lot of pushback from people calling him a coward. A lot of pushback. We hear this argument all the time that, well, why don't you just go and have a rational debate with the Nazi? And so,
format of how Bill's show works, Milo was going to be the first guest, which is a guest that goes out. It's just Bill and the guest in front of the stage for a few minutes, and then he goes back to the panel. And usually the guest that's on at the beginning of the show isn't invited to the panel. So it wasn't actually going to be any sort of debate per se. It would have been Milo on stage giving his spiel at the top of the show, and then they might have been able to talk about it afterwards later in the show or something, but that's what the format would have actually been. So I just thought that was
here's what I will say, right? So we're gonna have to break this down, but one of the things I want to make very clear about this new breed of a new atheist, and I'm not trying to equate them all together as being equally problematic. So don't put that on me. Don't put that even on me, Ricky Bobby. Well, I am saying that they all have a very similar strain, and we're talking about the alt-right new atheists, people like Milo, people like Bill Maher, people who have provided a new justification, a new veil, a new ideological underpinning. Your Sam Harris's, like pseudo-philosophical, pseudo-scientific, all this new underpinning for racism. They want you to come and they want you to debate them. They want you to be reasonable and have they use words like logic and rational, and why can't we just have a rational, calm debate? And so there's lots of reasons why they want this to happen. One is to validate them, and they feel they should be validated because even though society has largely moved past their racist ideas, they think because they're having their racist ideas that they're worth re-litigating. And I refuse to relitigate Nazism. This is something that you won't hear other places. What you have to understand is that part of their mindset, part of the way they get up in the morning, not sexually, Warner Wood joke.
I mean,
it's probably, they're probably, but one of the issues is that they want to pretend that they're not bigots, right? They're trying to pretend that their positions are reasonable and that they're real people. And part of that pretending is that they present this argument that, well, if you would just debate me, you could change my mind. And that's the way they escape the mental baggage of being a bigot. And the fact of the matter is that these people are not reasonable. They may have the semblance of reason. They may worship logic and worship science. They might have these little statistics that are always viewed in a vacuum, and they don't want to include any sort of evidence or analysis of statistics to contextualize why what they're saying is wrong. But the ultimate truth behind it is that they're just bigots, and you can't reason someone out of bigotry. Arguing with Milo is not going to change his mind. It's not going to change his fans' mind. It's not, and even people who are on the fence about whether they want to be a Milo supporter or not, they're not that smart because these are just bigots. If you can be reasoned into this kind of bigotry simply because it sounds like it makes sense, then you should really be reflective of your life. And for those people who are out there who this debate between Scahill and Milo would have, or Milo, I don't care, would have any merit. That group is very small. Like it's minuscule. And so all this would do is validate positions, and through the the performative aspect of debating, pretend like they are reasonable people. And that's what they want. They want you to debate them because they want to pretend like they're reasonable. But they aren't.
Well, on your point about about being reasonable people, I think Ben made a great point about a week or so ago on one of his shows about the Overton window, and this is how they're trying to manipulate it, trying to shove the far left rhetoric about like single payer health care, about a $15 minimum wage, those types of ideas out of the window, and bring in the Nazism, alt-rightism, the bigotry, the Islamophobia, all of that. They want to bring it in and have that be the new right and the new left be somewhere around where Hillary Clinton and that part of the Democratic Party stands, and leave the left wing of the Bernie movement completely out. And one of the things I want to push back quickly about that this could be useless. One of the few opportunities that I think could come out of Milo being on Bill's show is Milo is basically a coward when it comes to his own religion, the Catholic religion. He does not say the bombastic and inflammatory things he does about basically everyone and everything else about Catholicism or about some of the problems within Catholicism. And Bill,
like the fact that he's going to hell,
and Bill is merciless when it comes to religion, and so we know that. And so if he takes this opportunity to grill Milo on Catholicism and either force him to say something bombastic that could get him kicked out of the church, or make him look incredulous or lose his credibility to some of his supporters who support him because he says whatever he thinks, or that kind of say what's on your mind idea.
Well, all that's going to do, and this is why this becomes part of an issue. You don't debate with Nazis. You don't debate with. Like, I refuse to even entertain the idea of debating someone who thinks that everyone that looks like me needs to be wiped off the face of the earth, quite literally. So you do not legitimize that. But one of the things,
think some views are attributed to Milo that he doesn't have, and I mean,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that was Milo who said that.
Okay,
I didn't say it was Milo who said that. I said that like that's the Nazi ideal. That in particular was Sean Spicer, who said Spencer, whichever. I don't care if it's the press secretary or the head Nazi. They're the same to me. I really don't care. But to continue on what I was saying is that having Milo, little Nazi boy number 3, come on to the Bill Maher show and have that argument with Bill and be grilled by Bill is the simple fact of the matter is he's going to look like a victim. He's going to look like a victim because as problematic and as terrible as Bill Maher is, he's going to absolutely eviscerate this 20-pound ball of hatred that is Mr. Yiannopoulos. And he's going to then who is then going to go and cry and say, "Oh, I was treated unfairly by the big bad liberal, and so now I'm like this." And so all that really could happen. The only people that are at risk of being changed here are people that, for whatever reason, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a moderate, you're just as bad as the Nazi. You either speak out against Nazism or you are one. It's those people who are not actively speaking out now that could be very well turned off to the idea of anything even remotely progressive because they feel we're nothing but a bunch of bullies because they're going to feel sorry for Milo because they have the same religion. So all we risk doing is alienating moderates who need to speak the F up anyway. Stop sitting down on the sidelines and be a real adult. So there's absolutely no validity in having Milo come on. None whatsoever. Blackball him and beat the hell out of every Nazi you see. That needs to be the plan.
Here's the thing.
I don't think it's going to work.
Here's the thing. Bill Maher is not going to grill Milo because Bill Maher has already responded in this the same typical, which is, well, if he's really that bad, why wouldn't you debate him? And I think Jeremy has laid out, Scahill has laid out, or I don't know Chandler personally, so Scahill has laid out a very adequate reason why you should not debate someone who's Spencer or not. But Milo is just your typical alt-right hate monger. Your typical alt-right snake oil hate monger who feels victimized by this news or social justice warriors who like exist in small pockets on the internet who, like, let's be honest, don't even have half as much power as
I love how they call it.
I wonder does Milo bring people from on the right towards the left and being accepting of gay people as long as they're saying what they want or saying hateful things that he wants to
not at all.
Or is he just being embraced by people that are okay with gay people with gay lifestyle or whatever you want to with
people? They accept him because he calls himself, and forgive me, folks at home, because he uses that homophobic slur fag. He calls himself one on a regular basis because he's so self-deprecating, because he's filled with so much self-loathing. He fits into their narrative, right? So he fits into exactly what they feel all gay people should be. It's people like him, people that have this level of inherent self-loathing that they're okay with using such demonizing terminology. Now, mind you, if that's how someone identifies it, that's a word they choose to use for themselves in the community, much like we do in the Black community with the N-word, which I believe the three of us have had conversations in the past about, so please feel free to watch past episodes. But that is their choice. However, the right has this ideation that if you're not self-deprecating, if you're not filled with self-loathing and hatred of yourself because you're in this oppressed minority group, then really you don't fit in. But I mean, at the same time, he's also throwing everybody else under the bus. He's using that white male privilege. He's using that ideation that because he's a white male, he's inherently valuable. What he has to say is inherently valuable. And so by doing so, he's doing what groups in the past have done. He's doing what the Irish have done. He's doing what the Germans have done in this country at one point by trying to envelop himself in this ideation of whiteness, which includes feeding into white supremacy, which includes feeding into racism, which includes inciting violence against women and other minorities, ethnic and even sexual and gender minorities. He has he actively espouses, he actively causes people to be hurt. I may say I will beat every Nazi I see, but he actively gets people hurt because he will put people's first names on blast and tell his followers, go do whatever to this person, knowing good and damn well that his followers are willing to execute any acts of violence. One of his supporters shot somebody at the University of Washington. Look at Gamergate and the kind of threats that we were And the fact that people were quote unquote swatting people's houses, for those of you who don't know, that's when they call the police and say there's a fake hostage situation at somebody's house. Then the SWAT teams literally bust in.
I agree. And I think that you made, and I just want to get back to Bill Maher for a second. So he responded to, I was saying, and put out the fact that, well, if he is just this bad, if he really is this hate monger who makes people, who puts people in danger, well, why don't you come and debate him? And Scahill obviously laid out a very cogent reason, a very intelligent reason. Well, I'm not going to validate him. And then, he didn't explicitly say what I said, but the symbolic act from the optical level of debating someone like Milo puts them on the same level, and it gives the appearance as though their ideas are have equal amount of merit. That you should have to debate someone who is espousing that kind of hate is equal in merit intellectually or philosophically, or even within the way we should view as society as equal merit to what Jeremy Scahill would be talking. Disingenuous. But of course, Maher is not going to actually in any way challenge Milo or Milo, whatever. What he's going to do is they're going to tell little jokes. They're going to lose with self-predicting humor. They talk about, those social justice warriors who don't have a multi-million-dollar show on HBO and don't have hundreds of thousands of followers. They're the real problem. And it's like Adair said, the truth is there will always be a market in the establishment whose underpinnings are racist and homophobic and sexist for minorities, or rather representatives of oppressed groups, to get out there and espouse the status quo. There will always be room for Stacey Dashes in the world. There will always be room for Milos in the world. There will always be room for people who belong to an oppressed group who are willing to get on stage, parade out and say, yeah, don't worry, that oppressed group, they're just a bunch of whiners. Like, they're a bunch of whiners. Like, you see, I made it. And like, well, yeah, you made it because you're actively saying that they shouldn't make it, honestly. But just finally, Adair made another good point. It's this very lazy definition of violence that liberals subscribe to, that they overvalue the interpersonal violence, they overvalue physical violence, and they have a hard time understanding that what Milo and Spencer and Bill Maher are doing is also violence. Mm-hmm. And it's not physical violence, but it's and it's not only that they're inciting violence, but they are preaching and reaffirming and further socializing people into structural violence. They are further indoctrinating people and giving new justifications for structural inequalities, for wars, and that's a disgusting thing, right? So let me just before I'll let everyone have the last word, but I do want to talk about this. What I find particularly distasteful about Maher, and why I'm a bit. Okay, this is the line that Jeremy Scahill. I think some people are saying, well, hey, Maher is equally, if not equally problematic enough that you should have stopped going on him in the first place. As per his conversation with Sam Harris, that was shut down by Ben Affleck, which has always made me an Affleck supporter for the rest of my life. But no, he shut them down, and he should have. He's like, you guys are just racist. It's like, you're hiding behind this notion that it's Islam, but at the end of the day, you're just looking for new reasons to hate brown people. Yep. And so Adair laid it out very clearly that all this stuff is just a new Western justification for hating people who are different, for hating the other. When it comes down to Islamophobia, especially in this sort of liberal, alt-right, pseudo-intellectual Islamophobia, it's just that pseudo-intellectual is nonsense, and it comes out of this innate dislike of people who are brown, but these are the socially acceptable brown targets now,
right?
But what I will say, and like Maher is the master, at least from what I remember, because I haven't watched him in years, of like the pull-out method of disingenuous arguing. And like, both Maher
fails 99% of the time. Is that what you know?
Because once I explain to you what he does, you're going to say, oh yeah, he does do that. So what he does is he never explicitly makes an argument. He just uses the context of society to provide the argument for you. And he stops just sort of saying, so in talking about Islam or torture or the war or like the illegal wars in the Middle East or the drone program, what he will do is he'll provide like, I'm not saying Islam, that they deserve to be bombed to death. I'm not saying people deserve to be tortured, but here are all these bad things that I have identified with my very narrow understanding of Islam. Here are all the bad things they do to women. Here are all the bad things they do around the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying they should be bombed, but here's all the bad things. Let me you come to your own conclusion about what I'm just providing you with evidence.
Right.
And then when something bad happens, like a Muslim ban, I never said that. It's disingenuous semantic arguments because they don't have the balls in a lot of cases to come out and say, I don't like Muslims. I think they're problematic. We should ban them. We should bomb them. We should kill them. They should have no quarter. They just want to skate around the actual argument. They want to pull out at the last minute and never say, well, I don't care what happens to them because I find them problematic inherently. They just say, I find them problematic inherently. Like you come to your own conclusions. I say that in the context of society and what's going on in the Middle East, but I'm not advocating that we continue doing that.
They talk about it in the context of very Western ideas of what Middle Eastern society is, and very frankly racist and short-sighted, very narrow views of what actually goes on in some of these places. Now, mind you, I do not claim to be an expert on Middle Eastern culture and what's going on in different Middle Eastern countries. Far be it from me to say that I know anything about that. But because I don't know, I don't feel comfortable making these these broad justifications of violence and hatred and torture. No, these are people. Like, at the end of the day, these are still human beings. But I'm just this whole idea of debating Nazis really bothers me. And here's something I want to point out. Richard Spencer? Yeah? Spencer. Spicer's the nut job at the press secretary for the White House. But Spencer, he's like, I'm an intellectual. I'm very smart. My guy, you have a master's in music. Your master's degree is in music. Miss me with this, I'm some super intellectual type. Nah, dog, your master's is in piano theory. Go sit your ass down and write some Beethoven. Miss me with that garbage because you're not an intellectual. You are not.
Intellectual. They know
he's not an intellectual. He's not an intellectual.
They know
musicians are intellectuals. Richard Spicer is not. Spencer Spicer. Neither of them are intellectuals. Like neither Richard is an intellectual there. I don't give a damn what anybody says.
One is Sean Spicer, but
one is Sean. One is I don't give a damn. Richard and Sean both. They're both garbage.
They know a few contextless statistics, and they often confuse statistics. This is like because America is very science illiterate, but what Americans worship science. So they know a few contextless statistics about violence in the Middle East, or violence in Black communities, or violence towards women, or the discrepancies in achievement. They know contextless statistics, and they want you to look at them in a vacuum and say, well, hey, but isn't it bad that X happens to women and mothers? It's like, yeah, but that's an issue of geopolitics. That's a very complicated issue that has to do with colonization and disinvestment from countries and the way poverty affects social structures. And it's just like, no, Look at it in a vacuum.
Well, that's it.
Don't question it. just tell me what you think about the fact that 90% of Black people are killed by Black people. It's like, well, okay, but without the context, that number is meaningless.
I'm not going to debate geopolitics with a piano major. Like, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not. And that's no shade. That's no shade thrown at music majors. Music is a very important idea. That's not to say all music majors aren't intellectuals. I think musicians are by and large intellectuals. I think when you're that stupid, as in this Spencer cat, when you are literally that dumb that you tweet a cartoon of an American Nazi party that's suddenly taken over, that uses the swastika, that uses the armband, but it's red, white, and blue, so it must be American, and they're throwing people in internment camps where you say, well, we weren't planning on it, but people kept punching us in the face. Nah, bro, like that is the logical conclusion of your ideology. Your logical conclusion plays that out. Like, we've already had this argument. You were invaded and you lost. Accept it or get beat down.
I'm not going to relitigate Nazism with anybody, nor am I going to litigate whether or not they're really Nazis. And I think that's another meaningless argument to have with people that people want to have. Like, they want to argue semantics over whether or not these people are actually Nazis.
And I'm back.
And I'm just like, I refuse to litigate any of those things. It's just like those are semantic arguments that really don't mean anything. Like, he's advocating genocide. Does that make it better? I don't like. The desire for these people who are to pettifog over what you call them, but then complain about language policing. Oh yeah, the ACLU pissed me off with the Milo thing last week when they came out to defend him at Berkeley, and for some reason the American Civil Liberties Union doesn't understand what freedom of speech means, and I don't understand. I don't understand. And so you have people who are like, oh well, it's his freedom of speech. It's like, it's not freedom of speech. This is not the freedom of speech.
Right.
Says that the state will not infringe upon your right to say certain things, religion, etc., etc. They don't seem to understand the religion part of the First Amendment, but they understand a bastardized version of the freedom of speech part. And I'm
because it suits their needs.
Yeah, I wonder where people, but liberals also subscribe. So I understand why Bill Maher
suits your needs.
I understand. Seriously, I understand why Bill Maher wants Milo on the show. It'll get him ratings, and Bill Maher is but a hop, skip, and a jump from Milo. And if people take a hard line stance against Milo, one day they're gonna get to Bill Maher and take a hard line stance against him. So it is incumbent on Bill Maher to make sure that Milo never becomes he has been normalized. Let's be honest, he's been normalized in certain sections of the, but it makes sense from a business standpoint, also from like an emotional standpoint, for Bill Maher to make sure that Milo never becomes persona non grata, because one day that will be him. Because one day people will understand.
It should be him too.
Yeah, it should be. One day people will understand that Bill Maher.
That's the only thing I hope comes out of this, is that people see those two together talking about things, and the things that they agree on hopefully exposes Bill Maher and Milo to a degree to the people that follow them, that how much of a crock this all is.
And I mean, all they want to do is blame the fact that they're not funny on political correctness, but a lot of times they're just not funny. It's like Bill Maher, like Sarah Silverman's just not funny sometimes. And I would say, like, I honestly, and this is not to be that person, but like, I guess I'm not her target audience, but I would say maybe 33% of the things that the government have been funny.
One of the problems that I've been finding, one of the problems I find with the discussions with Bill Maher, Milo, with Richard Spencer, with anybody, with what happens is if suddenly one of these people says something, even if it's a legitimate argument, then it gets piled into the dumpster of dumpster things they say, so they can invalidate arguments. They can invalidate arguments simply by making them, even if they're a legitimate argument that's used elsewhere for legitimate purposes. So all they have to do is say it, and they can undermine its credibility and its substance. And that's a dangerous. I think that's dangerous.
I think it depends. It depends on who's saying it. Like I don't give a damn what Mr. Nazi Boy #1 has to say. I really don't care. Nothing you say matters.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Period. Like, so any argument you make just because you made it is automatically invalid, and you can go kick rocks. Like, I don't care I don't care, and I don't feel bad about it either. Same thing with Maher. I don't care. You're racist. What the crap you espouse is racist. The kind of things you're doing is perpetuating violence, my guy. What you have to say, I really don't care. Even if we agree, I'm not going to have that discussion with you. You can go kick rocks too.
I mean, that's the thing, right? So we get to the point where we understand why Bill Maher wants Milo on the show, because to problematize Milo, to really understand what the problem with Milo is to actually have to turn the gaze on Bill Maher too. And that's why I disagree with Scahill. And he's like, oh, well, like, these are just good people. And it's like, okay, so when you know them and they're your friends, they're good people. They're good people. Like, so now you understand one of the problems is, right? That you're unwilling to actually, turn that gaze upon, hold your own friends accountable, because
call out people that are
because like this, even what he said, like, he invites people on air to disagree with him. It's like the problem is that Bill Maher has a platform at all.
Yes,
it's like the only way to solve that problem with Bill Maher or monopolists is honestly not to debate them. It's not really to protest them. The way you solve that problem is that no one ever watches them.
Right.
And so this notion that, the notion that Jeremy Scahill puts out there, like, I know those people, the people who work for that racist, and they're good people. They're just doing their job. But Milo, he's a bridge too far. It's like, yeah, he's tangibly worse than Bill Maher is, but they're both past the red line. But like, one of them is your friend, and the other one is not, and you're able to hold your friend accountable. But my last point, I want to get your thought on this, is just like view of free speech, of that. Not only is it not the government's job to litigate against free speech, to curtail free speech in any way, but if it's speech that I think should be heard personally for whatever it suits my, it's what I like to hear, it's what I think suits my personal philosophy or my business sense, that people don't have the right to protest it. Private entities don't have the right to pull it, to deplatform it. That's what the ACL was critiquing, the fact that private citizens were advocating the deplatforming of Milo Yiannopoulos, that they were pressuring people using their freedom of speech to, pressuring Berkeley to deplatform Milo. And it seems as though there's a radical view of free speech that privileges white people who are espousing hate. But when you respond to that hate with your freedom of speech, which is the right to protest, the right to advocate for a private institution to deplatform them, that, you're not using your free speech right because you should allow them to speak. It's like, no, my free speech cannot be curtailed for their free speech. It's like we're all equal out here. But please go ahead. Sorry.
So, I mean, here's the thing: we do not correct people that are our ideological counterparts, right? Like we just don't do that. Like if you're on the left, if you identify as a liberal, if you identify as a Democrat, if you identify as a socialist, if you identify as any of these one things, we see this as such a golden ticket. This thing that allows you to say problematic things, that allows you to be racist. For example, George Lopez was allowed to say a racist joke and even cheered on after a black woman in the crowd flipped him off because he said something racist about black people. He contributed towards anti-blackness sentiments. He's continuing to be defended by people who feel like, well, because he's these things, because his identity is this, he can say whatever he wants. No, that's not the case. When I see people in the black community say things that are absolutely unacceptable, when I see black people say misogynist things, homophobic things like that, it's my job to call them out. It's our job to call out the people that belong to our communities. It's our job to call out the people like Bill Maher because frankly, he's a racist. And to not say that is to do ourselves a disservice, not just the people that are being attacked, but to do our brand, our group, our community a disservice because because we're allowing this to fester, because we are allowing these things to say we cannot allow a racist in our own midst to have such a platform, to have these things, to have this ideology, and just kind of ignore it away because, well, they do these kind of good things over here. They occasionally say something that I agree with, or they agree with me on economic things, so maybe I'll let his social chippy racism go. No, you need to call it out for what it is. It's racism, it's garbage, and he's a problematic person who needs to go.
Here's the thing: people have been conditioned, especially liberals and people let's say people on the left. The rank and file Democrat, your rank and file, not very engaged liberal, have been conditioned to define racism and sexism and misogyny and Islamophobia as very specific things that very specific people do, and those people are usually people on the right or people who are white. And so, if it's racism, and also very, very ignorant speech, if they associate racism with slack-jawed Republican yokels in West Virginia, and that both had the Democrats maintain dominance over this conversation about racism and sexism, but it's also how a lot of these people who engage in pseudo-intellectual, pseudo-philosophical racism and hatred and violent speech, they are able to escape blame. It's how Bill Maher is able to escape blame because his racism doesn't sound like the racism that the Democrats have been telling people what racists sound like, for the past 10 years. He doesn't say the N-word. He doesn't call for Muslims to be bombed back to the Stone Age or to be banned. He just dances around those things. He provides justifications for those things without actually saying what he's trying to justify. And on the other side, that was my larger point before.
Well, I mean, I agree with that point wholeheartedly. But I also want to say just that on the idea of free speech, right? The idea that especially because this is a problematic stance by the ACLU to say, well, you can't use your free speech violently. No, you can use your free speech however you damn well please. That's why it's free speech. If you want to burn a flag, that's protected speech. If you want to holler around town, that's protected speech. If you don't want a racist who has actively incited violence against marginalized groups of people speaking at your college campus or speaking at the publicly funded campus in your city, that is by all rights. Use your speech.
And even more problematic, people like Maher are who the Democrats want to elevate as the voice of the resistance.
Right.
And I think that people and this not only does he wear the veil and the cloak of, well, I'm a Democrat, I can't be Islamophobic. That's something that Republicans in the South do, and I'm a Democrat in New York City, so I'm the definition, right? Not the definition, but I'm the mainstream media's definition of what a good liberal looks like. I'm rich, I'm white, I say I believe in equal rights for women, I say I believe in LGBTQ causes, I'm not a religious fanatic. I'm what people say a good liberal looks like. And not only that, but he also veils himself in this, this pseudo, like, I'm a comedian, and comedy, has its fault. It's like, dude, it's like, what makes, like, you can go for making, I hate to have to explain to comedian and people who don't understand what comedy is, like how, like, yeah, racist jokes or jokes that are made to play with racist structures or structures of inequality have to take into account power dynamics. So you cannot just make a joke. As a man, I can't just make a rape joke and have it be acceptable because I say it's a joke. It has to actually play with the dynamics of power in that situation. Like, I wouldn't make a rape joke. I don't know how to do that. But there are some good male comedians who can play with and subvert the power dynamics that are inherent to that particular issue and make it funny because they are flipping it on its head and critiquing it. Maher's jokes about religion, Maher's jokes about Islam, his quote unquote jokes about them, they're not jokes. I mean, they're jokes in the sense that he might be trying to think they're funny, but really they're just thinly veiled critiques of something he doesn't understand. And by making it a joke, he's trying to take the coward's way out because he's too cowardly to say, I just don't like them.
He is too cowardly to say he just doesn't like them. But personally, and just real quick,
real quick. I'm sorry, guys. Seems like we're not going to get to Flynn because we're running out of time. That seems like we're still going to be talking about this. So that's my fault.
I think this is a worthwhile conversation, and we, Brandon, if you're not doing too much later, we can have a conversation about Flynn on Twitter. So you guys should actually try to follow that conversation. We'll include Progressive Green. At Progressive Greens, that's Richard. At Pretty Bad Lefty, that's Brandon. And you can see my Twitter handle right there, at Adair Schmidt PS. But anyways, I just want to say, Bill Maher is the antithesis of the resistance, right? Of this, what should be the liberal resistance. And personally, I also want to point out, for those at home, I actually, and frankly, Brandon, I disagree on making rape jokes, period. I disagree on making jokes about race, period. As a black person, I may make jokes and I may laugh about things and I may use humor as a way of coping with some of the issues that I deal with. But that's my decision as a person of color in America, as a mixed person, especially of color in America, because the things that I deal with are so much different than other ways. And so for me, I use humor to deal with that. Personally, I'm against a lot of different things. I don't think some things should be joked about, comedian or not. But I digress. I do want to talk about that idea of the resistance, though, and Bill Maher is absolutely the antithesis thereof. Bill Maher is what has got us into this mess in the first place. People like this horribly elitist. Frankly, he is a zealot. He's a new atheist zealot, and as an atheist, I frankly don't care what your religion is. I don't agree.
Bill Maher, I agree. Bill Maher is exactly how I got to this place.
I don't agree with a lot of different tenets, and again, I don't believe anything. So that's neither here nor there. Your religion is your religion, and you are entitled to have that. You are entitled to have that level of personal comfort that religion may give you. That's absolutely wonderful, and we should be actively seeking to include people of different faiths, different belief systems, as opposed to excluding them. Bill Maher and people like him have this ideation. It's a boys' club. It is this idea that I'm going to say I support women's rights. I'm going to say that I believe these things, but in reality, they very much don't. They never have. They never will. They are absolutely inclined to keep the status quo going. They're absolutely inclined to make sure that rich white males, particularly older rich white males, maintain as much power as possible. They are antithetical to what we need to be building as a movement. Our resistance has to be intersectional. Our resistance must be feminist. Our resistance must be pro-person of color. Our resistance must be pro-LGBTQIA. It is imperative that we look out for those, and it must be pro-persons of disability. We have to take care of those, the most marginalized among us. And people like Bill Maher have no interest in doing so. They are the reason why we are where we're at right now, because these are the people that ignore the most vulnerable in our communities. These are the people that group an entire voting block together, that group the entirety of the Midwest and say, well, you guys must just be a bunch of hillbilly racist rednecks, and so nothing you're going through matters. No, Those people in flyover country, even if you are a redneck racist hillbilly, your economic problems are an issue that need to be taken care of. I can think you're a piece of crap because you're a racist, but I don't want to see your kids go hungry. I don't want to see you lose your home. I don't want to see you lose your car. I want you to be taken care of. Why? Because that's the right thing to do. Because just as a human being, it is imperative that we take care of each other. And people like Bill Maher are absolutely and staunchly against this. And if you are, you cannot call yourself a member of the resistance. You cannot say you are the face of the resistance. No, you are the face of the status quo, and following people like you is only going to make this situation worse. We have to take care of the most marginalized among us, and that'll fix the problems for everybody else. So, Bill Maher, you got to go. You're not one of us. You can never be one of us. We don't accept racism. We don't accept that status quo-ness. We don't accept this your fascination with just being a horrible just a horrible person. You're just as bad as the Clinton campaign. You are just as bad as Hillary Clinton, who was a Goldwater girl and even hosted Barry Goldwater at the White House. You're just as bad as those people on the right. You are just as bad as Milo. You are just as violent. You are just as reprehensible, and you gotta go. And so those on the left, you want resistance news? Check out Progressive Army. You want people that actually give a damn, that actually are coming out here who genuinely care about people for no other reason that we recognize this is how things must be done. You're in the right spot, and make sure you tell your friends.
I mean, if anything, Bill, I agree with you, although I didn't catch all that because I kind of like time, but which I know it's rich coming from me. Yeah. But no, but like, Bill Maher, from my position, is indicative of, like you said, an issue that we have. It's just that when you're not in that elite bubble in terms of elite money, elite privilege, you recognize that the difference between a Bill Maher and the Republicans, the difference, when you're outside of that elite bubble, you recognize the difference between the resistance and the people they should be resisting is not far enough. That the resistance is composed of people who are still incredibly proud. The resistance is composed of Bill Mahers and Lena Dunhams and Amy Schumers, people who in their past have espoused such racist beliefs that, hey, what? But I'm a Democrat, and that makes it okay. And unfortunately, Bill Maher is like one of their poster boys. He's one of the poster boys. Like, had Trump not been president, you gotta believe Trump would be on Bill Maher right now. And I hate to say that, it's completely awful for the past 24 days, or I guess almost a month now. The issue is that, if Trump had lost, he'd be on Bill Maher right now. Like, after, maybe not right now, but after Maher, and they'd be joking about. That's just the case. It's only because Trump won that Bill Maher is resisting him. But but up until Trump won, he was part of that clique. Up until Trump won, he was part of the Bill Maher, the Bill Maher, Lena Dunham, Amy Schumer clique. He may have been a little bit to the right of them, but only due to the situation is he now their enemy, not due to really ideology. It's only once he became in the position to actually advocate his ideology, actually put it into action and policy, that he become their enemy and they're not resisting him. But their resistance is half-hearted, and they're, in a lot of ways, the Democrat establishment sanctioned resistance are snake oil salesmen. America has a cancer, and that cancer is Donald Trump. And the Democratic establishment are snake oil salesmen. They're trying to sell you a solution that they're not qualified to come up with, to a problem that you have. They want to sell you themselves as the solution to Trump, but that's just not. It's not a legitimate solution, and they don't even know how to solve that problem, to be honest.
Well, Trump is really more of a symptom of something that a larger sickness that they're a part of, and so. But
I mean, I'm sure Maher is like one of those people, like, I know that's never articulate. He's one of those people like like they're the Dave Rubins, like, I'm a classical liberal, which is just code for libertarian who hates brown people. Like at this point, classical liberalism as a coherent ideology that exists in America today seems to really be composed of three things. I believe in this radical notion of agency in the free market that is not real, but it allows me to blame poor people for their own problems, and pretend like I'm where I'm at. I hate this cabal of SJWs that exist only in my head and in small pockets on the internet that I go in search of to validate my hatred for them. I hate Islam. It's like that seems to be the new code for classical liberal now. Like, I don't think that's what all classical liberals think. I'm just saying that this sort of branch of Maher, Rubin, Sargon classical liberal, like that's all they ever seem to talk about. And so I can only define their ideology by what they talk about, which is hating poor people, hating people who are hating this sort of straw radical equality, and hating Muslims. That's what the classical liberal of mainstream of what I see on the internet always is. Oh yeah, and of course the cult of logic. This notion that like they're being incredibly rational, they're not being emotional, they're basically Spock. If Spock hated everyone who's different from them.
Yeah.
You know you're muted there, right?
Yeah, we don't.
You're muted, so no one can hear you.
Thank you for that. I didn't realize I was still muted. I was laughing, actually, so I wasn't actually speaking yet. But, just kind of thinking of just going through all of this and thinking.
We're in our last 4 minutes, so go ahead and wrap up. Go ahead and.
I was going to make a Lena Dunham joke, but I'd probably get ignored anyway, so I just leave that for another time. But just to wrap up, folks, I really do appreciate that you watched the show tonight. And I'm going to try to engage these two if I can point at them properly. I'm not great at this yet. I'm going to engage the two people below and to my right on Twitter about the Michael Flynn case. So please make sure you follow the tweets, like when I'm right, and make sure you tell Brandon he's wrong because he sucks. Holla at me on Twitter.
We have 3 minutes to talk about Michael Flynn probably. We'll
just do it on Twitter. We'll have the conversation on Twitter.
My quick thoughts on it is like, yeah, he probably should have been fired. It's not the hugest deal in the world. He should have been fired, but the more problematic issues about Michael Flynn is that he's a war hawk for Iran, but there's plenty of war hawks for Iran in the Trump cabinet. And B, the deep state seems to be engaged in this very open warfare with the Trump administration, and liberals are cheering the deep state on.
I found it quite funny that
my gosh,
literally,
it's almost as though they haven't read the church committee.
We're going to talk about this on Twitter, folks, because I want to engage with Brandon on this.
Yeah, and I mean the idea was that Trump isn't getting all of the top secret briefings because they're concerned about leaks, which they leaked that information to the press.
Well, they're not concerned about leaks. They're concerned that the Kremlin actually has someone in the room that is actively giving them information. They actively think Trump has been compromised. Basically, that's what they're saying.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess quickly to wrap up what I was going to say, one of the things I might try and drag into the conversation about Flynn is Linda McMahon. She went under the radar, but got approved for her nomination by something like 80+ majority. Lots of Democrats on there. Bernie Sanders didn't vote for her, along with Maria Cantwell, Washington senator, and a few others. But she's going to be terrible as a small business administrator leader. If you look about the foundation, the creation of the WWF, WWE, you'll find that she's engaged in some of the most atrocious practices when it comes to how she treated employees. So if people are if her idea of how to grow a small business into a $1 billion industry is what is going to be the guiding light for small businesses in this country, we're in for a very dangerous path. And with so many Democrats supporting her, even the Democrat that she ran against in Connecticut endorsing her for the position, it means that on both sides of this aisle, we're going to have a lot of danger to be navigating regarding how employees are going to be treated at the small business level. So
yeah, follow this conversation on Twitter, folks. We're great, I promise. Except Brandon,
I'm not tweeting anything. I'm going to bed. Tonight was
shut up, Brandon. You're tweeting. You're tweeting. Shut up. You don't get a choice.
But okay, fine. Yeah, let's continue this conversation on Twitter. Thank you for joining us tonight. It just has been wonderful talking with you again. Please follow all of us on Twitter and subscribe, like, share. Love you all. Have a good night.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
See you next week.